The rain came down in sheets that Saturday night, turning the cobblestones of the Lower East Side into mirrors that reflected nothing but darkness. Catherine Walker had stopped running 3 blocks ago. Her right ankle had given out somewhere near Delancey, the sharp pop followed by pain that made her vision swim. Now she lay curled against a dumpster in an alley that smelled of rotting vegetables and old grease, her white Armani suit soaked through, the laptop bag clutched to her chest like a shield that had already failed. The footsteps behind her slowed, stopped. She could hear breathing, heavy and deliberate. Her voice came out smaller than she'd ever heard it. "Please don't hurt me. I can't stand up." The figure moved closer, a silhouette against the dim glow of a streetlight half a block away. Catherine's fingers tightened on the laptop bag. Inside were emails, contracts, wire transfers, everything that proved Garrett Blake had been stealing from her for 2 years. Everything that proved her father had known and done nothing. The man took another step. Then a different voice cut through the rain, deep and commanding. "Step back, now!" Catherine turned her head. A second figure had entered the alley from the opposite end, taller, broader, carrying something small against his chest. The rain had plastered his jacket to his shoulders, but he stood perfectly still, feet planted, eyes locked on her attacker. The first man hesitated. Catherine watched his posture shift, the predatory confidence draining away as he assessed this new variable. Whatever he saw made him decide the odds had turned. He backed toward the street, raised both hands in a gesture that wasn't quite surrender and wasn't quite mockery, then disappeared around the corner. The second man waited a full 10 seconds before moving. When he did, he approached slowly, angling his body so Catherine could see his face in the faint light. Dark skin, maybe late 30s, eyes that carried the kind of calm that only came from staring down worse things than rain-soaked alleys. The bundle against his chest stirred, and Catherine realized it was a child, a little girl with her face tucked into the man's shoulder. He knelt beside her, keeping distance, keeping his free hand visible. "You're safe now." Catherine tried to speak, but the words caught. She was 41 years old, CEO of a $100 million venture capital firm, and she'd just been reduced to prey in an alley. The shame of it burned hotter than the pain in her ankle. The man's gaze dropped to her foot, then back to her face. "Can you walk?" she tried. The pain lanced up her leg and she gasped, sinking back against the dumpster. The little girl lifted her head, eyes wide. She couldn't have been more than 7, with braids that had come loose in the rain and a yellow raincoat that was 3 sizes too big. She whispered something to the man. He nodded, then looked at Catherine again. "I'm going to help you up. My apartment's 2 blocks from here. You need that ankle looked at." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't know this man, didn't know if the alley attacker was really gone or just waiting. Didn't know anything except that her phone was dead, her car was God knows where, and Garrett's people could be anywhere. The man seemed to read her hesitation. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you can't stay here, and you can't walk. So you've got 2 choices. Trust me for the next 10 minutes or wait for someone else to find you." The little girl reached into her coat and pulled out a pink scarf, offering it to Catherine with both hands. "You're cold." Something in Catherine's chest cracked. She took the scarf, the wool soft and worn, and nodded. The man shifted the child to his back, then bent and lifted Catherine in one smooth motion. She stiffened, unused to being carried, unused to being this vulnerable. He adjusted his grip, making sure her injured ankle hung free, and started walking. Catherine closed her eyes and tried not to think about how easily he moved. How the strength in his arms didn't come from a gym membership, but from years of carrying weight that mattered. She tried not to think about the fact that a stranger and his daughter had just saved her life, while her own father had chosen Garrett Blake's lies over her truth. The rain kept falling. 3 months earlier, Catherine Walker had stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building and believed she had control of her life. The city spread below her, a grid of light and ambition, and somewhere in that grid was a maintenance supervisor named James Thornton who spent his days fixing HVAC systems and his nights reading bedtime stories to a daughter who still drew pictures of her dead mother. Catherine didn't know he existed yet, didn't know that 3 months from now his daughter would give up her favorite scarf in a rainy alley, didn't know that the walls she'd spent 2 decades building were about to come down in the space of a single night. What she did know was that Garrett Blake was lying to her. It started with small things, calls that went to voicemail too quickly, meetings that ran late without explanation, the way his eyes would slide away from hers when she asked about the Vanguard acquisition, the deal that would cement Walker Meridian's position as the top healthcare venture firm on the East Coast. Catherine had learned young to trust her instincts. Her father, Harold Walker, had taught her that, back when he still cared about teaching her anything except obedience. She'd started digging 3 weeks before the alley, quietly using her own laptop, her own time. The first anomaly was small, a wire transfer for $15,000 to an LLC she didn't recognize. The second was bigger, an email chain between Garrett and someone named Dominic Kane, discussing terms for a merger that had never been presented to the board. The third was proof. A contract, dated 6 months prior, signed by Garrett Blake and countersigned by Kane. Walker Meridian would be absorbed by Vanguard Corp in a leveraged buyout. Garrett would receive $12 million in a C-suite position. Harold Walker would receive a board seat and a consulting fee. Catherine would receive nothing because by the time the deal closed, she'd have been voted out by a board her father had spent 18 months carefully packing with Garrett's allies. She'd confronted Garrett that same night in his apartment in Tribeca. He'd poured her wine, smiled his easy smile, and told her she was being paranoid. 2 days later, she'd confronted her father in his study in Greenwich. Harold had set down his bourbon, looked at her with eyes that might have been sad if they hadn't been so tired, and said the words that severed something Catherine hadn't known could be cut. Garrett's been loyal for 10 years. You've been difficult for 20. If I have to choose, Catherine, I'm choosing the one who doesn't fight me at every turn. She'd left without arguing. There was no point. Harold Walker didn't change his mind once it was made up, and he'd decided 2 decades ago that his daughter's value lay in her ability to execute his vision, not to have one of her own. Catherine had gone home, copied every file she could find, and made plans to take the evidence to the SEC. She'd scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. She'd drafted her resignation letter. She'd done everything right. Then Friday night, she'd stayed late at the office to finish the documentation. And when she'd finally left at 11:15, a man had been waiting in the parking garage. She'd run, he'd followed. And somewhere between the garage and the alley, Catherine Walker, CEO, board member, daughter of Harold Walker, had become just another woman who couldn't outrun the consequences of telling the truth. James Thornton's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Williamsburg, the kind of building that had survived gentrification by virtue of being too worn down to flip and too rent-controlled to demolish. The stairs creaked under their weight as he carried Catherine up, the little girl still clinging to his back, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay. The door opened into a space that was smaller than Catherine's closet. A couch with one cushion permanently dented, a coffee table scarred with ring marks, a kitchenette that could barely fit 2 people. Photographs covered the refrigerator, held in place by magnets shaped like letters. Children's drawings papered one entire wall. James set Catherine on the couch gently, then swung his daughter down. "Bedtime, Maya." The little girl shook her head. "But the lady is going to be fine. I'm going to help her, but I need you in bed first. Rules are rules." Maya looked at Catherine with eyes that were far too knowing for 7 years old, then nodded. She disappeared into a bedroom barely visible through a half-open door. James pulled a first aid kit from under the sink, then knelt in front of Catherine. His movements were practiced, efficient. He removed her shoe, Louboutin, now ruined, and the torn stocking beneath. His hands were rough, calloused, scarred across the knuckles, but his touch was gentle as he probed the swelling. Catherine flinched. "It's badly swollen, but I don't think it's broken. Can you move your toes?" She tried. Pain flared, but the toes obeyed. "Good. Not broken, probably just a bad sprain." He pulled an ice pack from the freezer, wrapped it in a dish towel, and pressed it against her ankle. "Keep that on for 20 minutes. He disappeared into the kitchenette and returned with a mug of something that smelled like ginger and honey. "Drink this. It'll help with the shock." Catherine took the mug with both hands. The warmth bled into her palms. "Why are you helping me?" James sat back on his heels, studying her. "Because you needed help. You don't know me." "No." He stood, moving to the sink to wash his hands. "But my wife used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when nobody would blame them for walking away." Catherine looked down at the mug. The steam rose in gentle spirals. "Your wife sounds wise." She was. James dried his hands on a towel that had seen better days. "She passed 3 years ago. Cancer." The flatness in his voice told Catherine everything she needed to know about how much it still hurt. She sipped the tea. Ginger, yes, and something else. Cinnamon, a hint of lemon. It burned going down, but the warmth spread through her chest, loosening something that had been clenched tight since the parking garage. Maya reappeared in pajamas covered in stars, carrying a stuffed rabbit with one ear sewn back on. She climbed onto the couch beside Catherine, not quite touching, and held out the rabbit. "Mr. Fluffy helps when you're sad." Catherine stared at the toy, at the careful stitches holding the ear in place, the faded patches where the fur had been loved, smooth. At this child who was offering her most precious possession to a stranger. She took the rabbit, held it, and then for the first time since her mother died when she was 12, Catherine Walker cried in front of another person. James said nothing. He simply sat in the worn armchair across from her and waited, his presence a steady anchor while she broke apart. Maya scooted closer and rested her head against Catherine's arm. When the sobs finally subsided, Catherine found her voice. It came out hoarse, scraped raw. "I need to change. I can't sit in these clothes." James disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a gray sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants. "They'll be big, but they're clean and dry." The bathroom was the size of a closet, but the towel he'd left was warm from the radiator and the mirror had been wiped clear of steam. Catherine peeled off her ruined suit, watching $15,000 of Italian tailoring hit the floor in a sodden heap. The sweatshirt smelled like laundry detergent and something underneath it, something clean and lived in. The sweatpants hung loose on her hips. When she emerged, James had made up the couch with a pillow and a blanket that looked handmade. Maya was back in bed, door cracked, probably listening. "You should sleep," James said. "We can figure out next steps in the morning." Catherine lowered herself onto the couch, every muscle in her body suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "I don't even know your name." "James Thornton." He paused. "And you're Catherine Walker. I've seen you in the building." She blinked. "What building?" "The Chrysler building. I'm the senior maintenance supervisor. Been working there for 6 years. He offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You probably never noticed me. Most people don't notice the guy who fixes the air conditioning." Catherine's face burned. He was right. She'd walked past maintenance workers for 2 decades without seeing them, without seeing him. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not an accusation, just a fact." James moved toward the bedroom, then stopped. "Your laptop. You held onto it pretty tight. Must be important." Catherine's hand moved instinctively to the bag she'd set on the floor. "It is." "Then keep it close. Whatever's on there, someone wanted it bad enough to chase you through the rain." His eyes met hers, and Catherine saw something there she hadn't expected. Recognition. Not of who she was, but of what she was carrying. I know what it's like to have something worth protecting. Sleep. We'll talk in the morning. He closed the bedroom door. Catherine lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of the building settling, the distant hum of traffic, the soft murmur of James's voice reading a bedtime story through the thin walls. She pulled out her phone, miraculously undamaged, and powered it on. 17 missed calls, all from Garrett, 6 voicemails. She deleted them without listening. One text from her father sent 2 hours ago. "Where are you? Garrett is worried." Catherine powered the phone off and shoved it back in her bag. She should leave. First thing in the morning, she should leave and take her evidence and disappear somewhere Garrett and her father couldn't find her. She should stop dragging this man and his daughter into her disaster. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Maya's face, open and trusting, offering comfort to a stranger, and James's hands steady and sure, binding her ankle. And the way he'd said my wife used to say, present tense in his heart, even though 3 years had passed. Catherine pulled the blanket up to her chin and let herself, just for tonight, pretend she was the kind of person who deserved to be saved. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of a 7-year-old trying to be quiet. Catherine opened her eyes to find sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been visible in the dark, illuminating a space that looked different in daylight. Still small, still worn, but clean and carefully kept. The drawings on the wall weren't random. They were dated, arranged chronologically, a visual diary of a child growing up. Maya was at the kitchen table drawing. She looked up when Catherine stirred, eyes bright. "Good morning. Did you sleep okay? Daddy said I had to let you rest, but I made you a picture." She held up a piece of construction paper. On it, 3 stick figures stood under a rainbow. One tall, one small, one with yellow hair that could only be Catherine. "That's you," Maya said, pointing. "You're smiling in my picture because you're not sad anymore." Catherine's throat tightened. "It's beautiful." James emerged from the bedroom, already dressed for the day in work clothes, jeans, a company polo, steel-toed boots. "Morning. How's the ankle?" Catherine tested it carefully. Still swollen, still tender, but the sharp pain had dulled to a throb. "Better." "Good." He poured coffee into a chipped mug that said "World's Best Dad" in fading letters. "Milk? Sugar?" "Black is fine." He handed her the mug and sat across from her, elbows on his knees. Maya continued drawing, humming something that might have been a song. "So," James said quietly, "what happens now?" Catherine wrapped both hands around the mug. "I don't know. Someone attacked you last night, someone who probably knows where you live, where you work. You've got a laptop you're protecting like it's the nuclear codes." He kept his voice level, factual. "I'm not asking for your life story, but I need to know. Are you in danger?" "Yes." "Is it the kind of danger that follows you? The kind that might end up on my doorstep?" Catherine met his eyes. She could lie, should lie, but something about the way he sat there, calm and unafraid, expecting honesty because he'd already given it, made the lie impossible. "Probably." James nodded slowly. He glanced at Maya, who was now adding flowers to her drawing, then back at Catherine. "Then we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look." "I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask, I'm offering." He stood, moving to the window. "I've got family upstate, Wisconsin. My mother has a farm in Door County, middle of nowhere. You could stay there while you figure out your next move." "Wisconsin." Catherine tested the word. She'd never been to Wisconsin, had never been anywhere that wasn't a city, a conference, a deal. "It's quiet, safe. My mom doesn't ask questions she doesn't need answers to." James turned back to her. "But before we talk about that, you need to tell me what's on that laptop. Because if I'm putting my daughter anywhere near this situation, I need to know what we're dealing with." "Fair." More than fair. Catherine set down the coffee and reached for her bag. Her fingers found the laptop, pulled it out, opened it. The screen came to life, password protected. She entered the code and pulled up a folder. My name is Catherine Walker. I'm the CEO of Walker Meridian Ventures. The man who attacked me last night works for my CFO, Garrett Blake. Garrett has been embezzling from the company for 2 years and is in the process of selling it to a competitor without board approval. I have proof. She turned the screen toward James. This is it. Emails, wire transfers, contracts, everything. James leaned forward, scanning the documents. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a coiling tension like a spring being compressed. Your father, he said, still reading. Harold Walker. I've seen his name in the news. He knows about this? He does. And he chose Garrett. James looked up. Over his own daughter? Over the truth. Same thing in the end. He closed the laptop and handed it back to her. You're planning to go to the authorities. I was. I had a meeting scheduled for Monday with the SEC. Catherine's laugh came out bitter. That was before Garrett decided to speed up the timeline. What changed? I told my father I was done, that I'd go public if he didn't stop the sale. She rubbed her eyes. He must have told Garrett, and Garrett must have decided I was more of a liability than an asset. Maya had stopped drawing. She was watching them with the uncanny focus children have when they know something important is happening. James crouched in front of Catherine, bringing himself to eye level. Listen to me. What you're describing isn't just corporate fraud, it's conspiracy, possibly attempted murder. If Garrett's willing to have you attacked in a parking garage, he's not going to stop just because you disappeared for a few days. I know. So you need more than a hiding place, you need a plan. He stood pacing the small space. My mother's farm buys you time, but time for what? To build a case, to find a lawyer, to figure out who you can trust? All of that. Catherine looked down at the laptop. I don't know who else Garrett has in his pocket. The board, definitely, maybe the police. I can't just walk into a precinct and hope for the best. What about the press? Catherine had considered it. Too risky. If I go to the media without bulletproof documentation, Garrett will spin it as a disgruntled executive with an axe to grind. He'll bury me in litigation before the story even runs. James stopped pacing. Then you need someone who can't be bought and can't be bullied. Someone who owes you. I don't have anyone like that. Everyone has someone like that. They just don't always know it yet. Before Catherine could respond, there was a knock at the door, sharp, insistent. Maya jumped. James moved to the window, looked down at the street. His shoulders went rigid. Black sedan, tinted windows, 2 men in the front seat. Catherine's heart kicked into her throat. They found me. Did you turn your phone on last night? Just for a minute, just to check messages. Long enough. James crossed to the door in 3 strides, looked through the peephole. They're not at the door yet. They're watching the building, which means they're waiting for confirmation you're here before they move. What do we do? James's mind was already working. She could see it in the way his eyes tracked possibilities. Back exit, through the courtyard. There's an alley that comes out 2 blocks over. They'll see us leave. Not if we don't look like us. He grabbed Maya, who wrapped her arms around his neck without question. To Catherine. Can you walk? She stood. The ankle protested but held. Yes. Then move. Now. James led them through the apartment at a pace just shy of running, out the back door, down a different set of stairs that smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. The courtyard was a concrete square hemmed in by buildings on all sides, laundry lines strung between fire escapes, a few scraggly plants in pots. They crossed it in seconds. James pushed through a gate that hung crooked on its hinges into an alley barely wide enough for 1 person. Catherine followed, her ankles screaming with each step, the laptop bag banging against her hip. Behind them, voices, footsteps on the stairs they'd just descended. James didn't look back. He turned left at the end of the alley, then right, then left again. navigating the maze of Brooklyn's back passages with the ease of someone who'd grown up here. Maya stayed silent against his shoulder, her face buried in his neck. Finally, they emerged onto a street Catherine recognized from last night. The rain had stopped, but the gutters still ran with water, carrying debris towards storm drains. James flagged a cab that was dropping off a passenger. "Get in." Catherine slid across the seat. James passed her Maya, then climbed in beside them, pulling the door shut. "Penn Station, fast as you can." The driver pulled into traffic without comment. Maya lifted her head. "Daddy, what's happening?" "We're taking a trip, sweetheart. Remember Grandma Louise's farm?" Maya's face lit up despite the tension. "We're going to Wisconsin?" "We are." "What about school?" "I'll call your teacher. This is more important." Catherine looked at James. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to upend your life for someone you met 12 hours ago." James met her gaze. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "My wife died in a hospital bed, asking me to promise I'd always help people who needed it. I made that promise. I'm keeping it. Even if it costs you everything? I've already lost everything that mattered. What I've got left isn't worth keeping if I don't use it for something good." The cab wove through traffic. Catherine watched the city slide past, the buildings she'd conquered, the streets she'd owned. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, Garrett Blake was consolidating power. Her father was choosing complicity, and the life she'd built was collapsing like a house of cards. But beside her sat a man who'd given up his Saturday morning, his safety, maybe his future to help a stranger. And in her arms sat a little girl who'd given up her favorite scarf because someone looked cold. Catherine held Maya a little tighter and tried to remember the last time anyone had chosen her over convenience. Came up empty. "Thank you," she whispered. James just nodded. Penn Station on a Sunday morning was chaos wrapped in stale air and anxiety. James bought 3 tickets to Chicago on his credit card. Cash would have been better, but he didn't have enough on hand. Then immediately bought 3 more tickets to Buffalo at a different window, using cash this time. He handed Catherine the Buffalo tickets. "In case they track the Chicago purchase, always have a backup exit." Catherine stared at the tickets. "You've done this before." "I used to be a firefighter. We drilled escape routes until they were muscle memory. Same principle applies." He glanced at the departure board. "Our train leaves in 40 minutes. We should split up until boarding. Less conspicuous." "Where?" "Food court, southwest corner. I'll get Maya something to eat. You find a table near the exit. Don't use your credit cards. Don't call anyone. Just sit and blend in." Catherine nodded. She watched them walk away, James's hand firm on Maya's shoulder, and felt the absence of them like a physical thing. She found the table James had described and sat with her back to the wall, laptop bag in her lap. Around her, the station churned with travelers. Families heading home from weekend trips, college students with backpacks, businessmen checking watches. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in this building sat a woman carrying evidence that could destroy a $100 million company. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out without thinking. Text from Garrett. "Catherine, please, we need to talk. I know you're scared, but I can explain everything. Tell me where you are." Her finger hovered over the delete button. Another text. "Your father is worried sick. He just wants to know you're safe. Delete." Another. "I'm trying to protect you. There are people involved in this you don't understand. Dangerous people. Let me help." She powered the phone off and dropped it in a trash can 3 tables away. When James and Maya returned, Maya was carrying a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon, and James had 2 coffees. He set one in front of Catherine without comment. "They're looking for you," he said, voice low. "How do you know?" "2 men just showed the station police a photo, your photo. They're telling them you're a missing person, possibly mentally unstable, families worried." Catherine's coffee turned to acid in her stomach. Garrett's playing the concerned fiancé angle. Is he your fiancé? Was. I broke it off 3 months ago when I found the first irregularity in the books. He took it badly. She laughed without humor, though apparently not badly enough to stop stealing from me. Maya pulled a muffin from the bag and broke it in half, offering one piece to Catherine. You should eat. Grandma Louise says you can't think on an empty stomach. Catherine took the muffin. It was still warm. James checked his watch. 20 minutes until boarding. We should move toward the platform, but not together. Maya and I will go first. You follow 2 minutes later. Don't make eye contact with anyone. Don't rush, just another passenger. And if they stop me? They won't. They're looking for a woman alone, scared, running. You're going to walk like you belong here, like you have every right to be on that train. His eyes held hers. Because you do. Catherine nodded. James stood, took Maya's hand. Platform 7, car 3, we'll save you a seat. They disappeared into the crowd. Catherine counted to 60, then 60 again. On the third 60, she stood, shouldered her laptop bag, and walked toward Platform 7 with her head up and her pace steady. The 2 men Garrett had sent were near the ticketing windows, still talking to police. One of them looked up as she passed, gaze sliding over her without recognition. The sweatshirt and sweatpants, the lack of makeup, the way she carried herself. It was enough of a disguise that he saw a tired traveler instead of a missing CEO. She kept walking. Down the stairs, onto the platform, into car 3, James and Maya had taken seats near the middle. Catherine slid in beside them just as the departure announcement crackled overhead. The train lurched into motion. Catherine watched Penn Station recede, then the city, then the familiar skyline that had been her kingdom. Somewhere in that sprawl of buildings was her corner office, her penthouse apartment, her carefully curated life. None of it felt real anymore. What felt real was Maya's head resting against her arm, the child already half asleep. What felt real was James's presence across the aisle, solid and unshakable. What felt real was the laptop bag in her lap and the knowledge that for the first time in her adult life, Catherine Walker was choosing truth over safety. The train picked up speed, carrying them toward Wisconsin, toward a farm she'd never seen, toward a future she couldn't predict. Behind them, New York City disappeared into the distance. Ahead, somewhere in the approaching dark, lay the only thing Catherine had left worth fighting for, the right to tell her own story in her own voice, before someone else wrote the ending for her. She closed her eyes and tried to believe that was enough. The train crossed into Wisconsin as dawn broke over farmland that stretched endlessly in every direction. Catherine woke to find Maya pressed against the window, nose leaving fog circles on the glass as she narrated the passing landscape. Look, cows, and a red barn, Daddy. Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 barns. James sat with his eyes closed, but Catherine could tell he wasn't sleeping. His jaw carried tension that hadn't been there yesterday, and his hand rested on his phone like he expected it to ring with bad news. Catherine checked her watch. 6:17. They'd been traveling for almost 15 hours, counting the layover in Chicago where James had bought new phones with Key and destroyed their old ones in a gas station bathroom. The precaution felt paranoid until Catherine remembered the men at Penn Station, the way Garrett's reach extended further than she'd imagined. The conductor's voice crackled overhead. Green Bay, 20 minutes. James opened his eyes. Almost there. Mom's meeting us at the station. Does she know why we're coming? I told her I needed a place to stay for a while, that I was helping someone. His gaze shifted to her. She doesn't ask questions she doesn't need answered, but she's not stupid. She'll figure out you're running from something. And she's okay with that? My mother spent 30 years married to a man who drank himself to death. She knows what it looks like when someone needs sanctuary. James stood, stretching muscles cramped from overnight travel. Just be straight with her. Louise Thornton can smell a lie from 3 counties away. Green Bay Station was smaller than Catherine expected. a single-story building that looked like it had been standing since the 70s. The platform was nearly empty except for a handful of early commuters and one woman who stood apart from the others. Hands in the pockets of a canvas jacket, silver hair caught back in a braid. Louise Thornton was shorter than her son, but she carried the same solid presence, the same watchful calm. Her eyes found James first, then Maya, then settled on Catherine with an assessment that was thorough and completely without judgment. Maya launched herself into her grandmother's arms. "Grandma! We rode the train all night and Daddy bought me hot chocolate in Chicago and there was a man with a guitar who played songs." Louise hugged her granddaughter, then straightened and looked at James. "You look tired." "I am tired. And this must be the someone you're helping." Catherine stepped forward, suddenly aware of how she must look in James's borrowed clothes, hair unwashed, the laptop bag she hadn't let out of her sight in 18 hours. "Catherine Walker, thank you for—" Louise held up a hand. "Save it for the drive. You can thank me after you've slept and eaten. Both of you look like you're running on fumes." The truck was a Ford F-150 that had seen better decades. Louise drove with the competence of someone who'd been navigating these roads her entire life, pointing out landmarks to Maya while James sat in silence. They turned off the highway onto progressively smaller roads until finally pulling onto a gravel drive that led to a 2-story farmhouse surrounded by fields on 3 sides and woods on the 4th. The house was white-clapboard with green shutters, a porch that wrapped around the front, and smoke rising from a chimney that suggested someone had started a fire hours ago in preparation for their arrival. Louise cut the engine. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere. Come on, I've got breakfast waiting." The inside of the house smelled like wood smoke and bacon. The furniture was old but well-maintained, the kind of pieces that got passed down through generations. Photographs covered every available surface. James as a child, James in his firefighter uniform, James on his wedding day with a woman whose smile could light up a room. Catherine found herself staring at that last photo. Angela Thornton had been beautiful in the way that had nothing to do with features and everything to do with the life that radiated from her eyes. Louise appeared at her elbow. "That's my daughter-in-law, was. She passed 3 years ago this October. James told me, I'm sorry. So am I. Angela was the best thing that ever happened to my son." Louise moved to the kitchen, started pulling plates from a cabinet. "But you don't get to pick your heartbreaks. You only get to pick what you do after." They ate at a table that could seat 8, but currently held 4. Louise had made eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, more food than Catherine had seen in one place in months. Maya ate with the enthusiasm of a 7-year-old who'd been promised she could explore the farm after breakfast. James ate mechanically, refueling more than tasting. Catherine forced herself to finish half her plate, then pushed it away. "Mrs. Thornton." "Louise. Louise, I need to be clear about what you're getting into by letting me stay here. The man I'm running from has resources. If he finds out I'm here, he'll come, and he won't come alone." Louise sipped her coffee. "This man, he hurt you." "He tried to. And my son stopped him." "Yes. Then I'm already involved, aren't I?" Louise set down her mug. "James doesn't bring people home unless he's committed to seeing them through. If he thinks you're worth helping, that's good enough for me. Besides, this is Wisconsin. We don't take kindly to men who hurt women." Maya looked up from her eggs. "Are you fighting bad guys, Miss Catherine?" Catherine glanced at James, unsure how much the child knew. James nodded permission. Catherine turned back to Maya. "I am." "Good. Bad guys should lose." "They don't always." Maya's expression turned serious. "But they should, and somebody has to make them." The simple certainty in her voice settled something in Catherine's chest. "You're right. Somebody does." After breakfast, Louise showed Catherine to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. It was small but clean, with a window that looked out over fields that seemed to go on forever. A quilt covered the bed, handmade from the look of it, each square a different pattern. Bathrooms across the hall, towels in the closet. You need anything, holler. Louise paused at the door. My son is a good man, one of the best I know. Whatever you're running from, he'll help you face it. But don't mistake his kindness for weakness. James has stared down worse things than crooked businessmen. Catherine set her laptop bag on the dresser. What did he see? When he was a firefighter? Louise's face shifted, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with age. There was a fire, apartment building in Brooklyn. James went in with his partner to clear the upper floors. They found a little girl, maybe 5 years old, hiding in a closet. James's partner took her down while James checked the rest of the floor. She stopped, gathering herself. The building came down before he could get out. James survived. His partner didn't. Neither did the little girl's mother, who'd been in the other room. James pulled 3 more people out before the roof collapsed, but it didn't matter. All he could think about was the ones he didn't save. Catherine's throat tightened. That's why he left firefighting. That's why he learned that sometimes helping one person the right way matters more than trying to save everyone the wrong way. Louise met Catherine's eyes. So when he chose to help you, he chose it knowing what it might cost. Don't waste that choice. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Catherine stood in the silence, looking out at land that had probably looked the same for 100 years. No skyscrapers, no traffic, no ambient hum of a city that never stopped moving. Just fields and sky and the kind of quiet that made you hear your own thoughts whether you wanted to or not. She pulled out the new phone James had bought in Chicago and stared at it for a long moment before typing a number from memory. The call connected on the 3rd ring. Diane Mitchell. Relief flooded through Catherine so sharp it hurt. Diane, it's me. Silence. Then, oh my God, Catherine, where are you? Garrett's been telling everyone you're missing, possibly having a breakdown. Your father filed a missing persons report. I'm safe. I can't tell you where, but I'm safe. The police are looking for you. They came to my apartment yesterday asking questions. I didn't tell them anything because I don't know anything, but Catherine, what the hell is going on? Catherine sat on the edge of the bed. How much do you know about the Vanguard deal? Just what Garrett told the board, that it's a strategic partnership that will position Walker Meridian for major growth. The vote is in 3 weeks. It's not a partnership. It's a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. Garrett's been siphoning money for 2 years and he's selling my company to cover his tracks. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Catherine checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, you have proof? Emails, wire transfers, contracts with both signatures, everything. Then why aren't you going to the police? Because I don't know how deep this goes. Garrett has my father in his pocket. He might have board members. He definitely has someone in law enforcement, or he wouldn't have found me at James's apartment so fast. Who's James? Catherine looked toward the door, hearing Maya's laughter drifting up from downstairs. Someone who helped me when no one else would. Diane's voice dropped. Catherine, listen to me. 3 days ago, Garrett called an emergency board meeting. He presented evidence that you've been under extreme stress, making erratic decisions, possibly embezzling funds yourself. He showed emails allegedly from you authorizing suspicious transfers. Catherine's blood went cold. I never sent those emails. I know, but they have your signature, your email address, timestamps from your work computer. He forged them. Obviously, but the board doesn't know that. Harold backed up everything Garrett said. They voted 9-3 to remove you as CEO pending a psychiatric evaluation and forensic audit. The room tilted. Catherine gripped the edge of the bed. When? Yesterday. I'm so sorry. I tried to object, but I'm just an assistant. Nobody listens to... Who voted against? Thomas Chen, Margaret Riley, and David Foster. Everyone else fell in line. 3 board members out of 12. Not enough to stop anything, but enough to suggest not everyone had bought Garrett's story wholesale. Catherine's mind raced through implications, contingencies, next moves. Diane, I need you to do something for me. It's going to put you at risk. I'm already at risk. They fired me this morning. Garrett said my loyalty was compromised. Diane's laugh came out bitter. So yeah, I'm very motivated to help you burn this bastard down. What do you need? Access to the company server, specifically the backup logs from my email account. If Garrett sent those emails from my address, there'll be a record of the login location and device ID. I don't have access anymore. They revoked my credentials. But you know someone who does. Silence. Then, Marcus in IT owes me a favor, big favor, but Catherine, if we get caught, don't get caught. Catherine stood, pacing the small room. I need those logs by tomorrow night. Can you do it? I can try. Where do I send them? Catherine rattled off the email address for the new phone. Don't call this number again unless it's an emergency. Don't tell anyone you talk to me. Act like you're bitter about being fired, angry at me for putting you in this position. Won't be hard. Part of me is bitter and angry. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be right. Because if you're wrong about this, we're both going to prison. Diane paused. There's something else. Garrett's hired a private security firm, Harmon and Associates. They're telling people it's for your protection, to find you before you hurt yourself. But I've seen the team lead, ex-military, not the kind of guy you hire for a wellness check. Catherine's hands went numb. How many people? At least 4 that I saw. Could be more. If they find me here, then make sure they don't. And Catherine, whatever you're planning, do it fast. The board vote to finalize the Vanguard sale is in 18 days. The call ended. Catherine sat in the silence, feeling the walls close in despite the open fields outside. 18 days. Not enough time to build a legal case. Barely enough time to get the evidence authenticated and presented. She needed a lawyer, not a corporate attorney who'd bill by the hour and take 6 months to file paperwork. She needed someone who understood that time was a weapon and Garrett was using it. A knock at the door, James's voice quiet. Catherine, you okay? She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still in his travel clothes, looking like he'd aged 5 years since Penn Station. I just talked to my former assistant. Garrett's moved faster than I thought. He's had me removed as CEO, told the board I'm mentally unstable, and hired private security to find me. James's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. How long until they track you here? I don't know. Days, maybe. If he traces my assistant's phone records, then we assume he will and plan accordingly. James pulled out his own phone. I'm calling Daniel Torres. Who? Friend of mine. We served together in the fire department. He went to law school after he got out, works as a defense attorney now. Specializes in cases where the system's rigged against the defendant. James was already dialing. If anyone can help you, it's him. The call connected. James stepped into the room, closing the door. Daniel, it's James Thornton. I need a favor, big one. He listened, then. I'm serious. I've got someone here who's being framed for embezzlement by her CFO. The board's voting in 18 days to sell her company. She's got evidence of fraud, and there are guys with guns looking for her. Catherine couldn't hear the response, but she heard the change in James's voice. Yeah, I'm sure. I wouldn't call if I wasn't. Pause. Wisconsin. My mom's place. Another pause. Can you get here by tomorrow? James's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Thanks, brother. I owe you. He ended the call and looked at Catherine. Daniel's driving up tonight. He'll be here by morning. Just like that? I pulled him out of a burning apartment in 2019. He said if I ever needed anything, just ask. James moved to the window, looking out at the same fields Catherine had been studying. He's good. Won the Hernandez case last year. Remember that? Catherine did. Miguel Hernandez, a construction worker who'd been accused of stealing materials from his own job site. Turned out his foreman had been running a side business selling supplies and had framed Hernandez to cover it up. The case had made national news when the foreman got 15 years. Daniel Torres did that? He did. Pro bono, because Hernandez couldn't afford a real lawyer and Daniel doesn't like watching innocent people get crushed by systems that protect the powerful. James turned back to her. You're not alone in this fight, Catherine. Stop acting like you are. The words hit harder than they should have. Catherine had spent 20 years learning to be alone, to rely on no one, to expect nothing from anyone except what she could force them to give through leverage or money or fear. And here was a man she'd known for 2 days telling her that was over. I don't know how to do this, she heard herself say. I don't know how to accept help without calculating what I owe in return. James crossed the room and took her hands. His palms were warm, rough with calluses. You don't owe me anything, that's the whole point. Help isn't a transaction, it's just what you do when someone needs it and you can give it. Catherine looked down at their joined hands. Your wife taught you that. She tried. Took me a while to learn it. His grip tightened slightly. But I'm a better man for it. And you're going to be a better person for learning to trust that not everyone wants something from you. Downstairs, Maya called out, Daddy, Grandma says I can feed the chickens. James released Catherine's hands, stepped back. Get some rest. Daniel will have questions when he gets here and you need to be sharp. I'll wake you for dinner. He left, pulling the door closed behind him. Catherine stood in the quiet, feeling something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, cracking the way ice cracks when spring comes, letting through light that had been buried all winter. She lay down on the quilt-covered bed and closed her eyes. For the first time since the parking garage, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she might survive this. Catherine woke to the smell of something cooking and the sound of voices downstairs. The light outside had shifted to late afternoon gold. She'd slept for 6 hours. She splashed water on her face in the bathroom, borrowed a hair tie from a drawer, and went downstairs to find the kitchen full of people. Louise was at the stove. Maya sat at the table drawing. James stood by the refrigerator talking to a man Catherine didn't recognize. Mid-40s, Hispanic, glasses, wearing a button-down shirt rolled to the elbows. The stranger looked up when Catherine entered. Ms. Walker, Daniel Torres, James filled me in on the drive-up. Hell of a situation you're in. Catherine shook his offered hand. You got here fast. I was in Milwaukee for a deposition, only 3 hours away. He gestured to the laptop bag she'd carried downstairs. That the evidence? Yes. Good, let's take a look. They spread out at the dining room table. Catherine opened files while Daniel took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of each document. This email from Garrett to Kane, dated March 15th. You're sure about the timestamp? Positive. I was in Singapore for a conference. The time zone difference is reflected in the metadata. Daniel made a note. And you have documentation proving you were in Singapore on that date? Passport stamps, hotel receipts, photos from the conference. Perfect. That's your alibi for the emails Garrett claims you sent. He pulled up another file. These wire transfers, they're all going to shell companies registered in Delaware? Yes, 3 different LLCs, all created within 6 months of each other. All with Garrett as the registered agent. Beautiful. We can pierce that corporate veil in about 20 minutes. Daniel sat back, removing his glasses to clean them. Okay, here's what we're looking at. You have enough evidence to charge Garrett Blake with embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and probably a dozen other things. The problem is jurisdictional. Catherine leaned forward. What do you mean? Walker Meridian is incorporated in Delaware, headquartered in New York with business dealings across multiple states. The Vanguard Corp merger involves entities in New York, Delaware, and California, which means we could file in any of those jurisdictions and each one has different statutes, different timelines, different standards of evidence. So which one do we choose? The Southern District of New York, federal court. It's where white-collar cases go to die or fly, and right now we want to fly. Daniel put his glasses back on. But here's the catch. Federal prosecutors don't take cases unless they're airtight. We need more than what you've got. Catherine felt the ground shift under her. This isn't enough? It's enough to start an investigation. It's not enough to stop that board vote in 18 days. Daniel tapped the legal pad. What we need is someone on the inside. Someone who can testify that they witnessed Garrett's actions, heard him discuss the scheme, saw him create those fake emails. My former assistant is trying to get server logs, but she doesn't have access anymore. Not good enough. We need a live witness who can walk a jury through what Garrett did step by step and explain why it was illegal. Daniel looked at James, then back to Catherine. You know anyone on that board who might flip? Catherine thought of the 3 votes against her removal. Thomas Chen, Margaret Riley, David Foster. Maybe, but approaching them is risky. If they tell Garrett, then we're sunk before we start, I know. Daniel stood, pacing. Okay, different angle. You said Garrett hired private security to find you. Harmon and Associates? That's what Diane told me. I know that firm. They're expensive and they don't ask questions. If Garrett's paying them, there'll be contracts, invoices, payment records. Those documents would show he knew you weren't actually mentally unstable. He just wanted you found before you could expose him. Catherine saw where he was going, which proves malicious intent. Exactly, but getting those records means either hacking the firm's database, illegal, or subpoenaing them, slow. Louise appeared with coffee for everyone. Or you could just ask. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. She set down the mugs. I have a friend who works in billing for a security firm in Milwaukee. Not the same one, but these outfits all use the same software, same systems. If you knew the invoice number or the client code, you could call in claiming to be from accounting, say you need to verify a payment. Daniel stared at her. Mrs. Thornton, that's social engineering. That's how my friend told me she caught her husband hiring people to follow her before their divorce. Louise's smile was sharp. Women learn to use the tools we have. You want those records or not? Catherine looked at James. Your mother is a little terrifying. Where do you think I learned to be resourceful? Daniel rubbed his face. Okay, even if we get the Harmon and Associates records, we still need testimony. We still need someone who can get on a stand and say, I saw Garrett Blake commit fraud. The room fell quiet. Then Maya looked up from her drawing. What if the bad guy tells on himself? Everyone turned to her. James crouched beside his daughter. What do you mean, sweetheart? In my cartoons, the bad guys always brag about their plan before they lose. They can't help it. They want everyone to know how smart they are. Maya went back to coloring. Maybe this bad guy is like that too. Daniel and Catherine exchanged glances. Catherine's mind started turning over possibilities. Garrett's arrogant. He always has been. If he thought I was cornered, if he thought he'd won, he'd want to gloat, Daniel finished. He'd want you to know exactly how he beat you. And if we recorded it, single-party consent state, New York allows it, Wisconsin allows it. If you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. Daniel was already pulling up statutes on his phone. But you'd have to get him talking, really talking. Admitting to specific actions, specific amounts, specific intent. James shook his head. Too dangerous. If Garrett's hired professionals to find Catherine, he's not going to meet with her alone. It would be a trap. Unless he thinks she's surrendering, Louise said quietly. They all looked at her. She met Catherine's eyes. If you called him, told him you were scared, told him you wanted to make a deal, immunity for testimony or money for silence, whatever he'd believe, he might meet with you, especially if he thinks he's already won. Catherine's pulse kicked up. It could work. Garrett's ego is his weakness. He'd love the chance to see me beg. No. James's voice was flat. Absolutely not. You walk into a room with Garrett and his security team, you don't walk back out. I wouldn't be alone. You'd be there. I'm one person. Harmon and Associates travels in teams of 4 minimum. Daniel held up a hand. Before we get into tactics, let's talk reality. Even if we record Garrett confessing to everything, we still have the board vote problem. The Vanguard sale goes through in 18 days. A recording gets us criminal charges, but it doesn't stop the vote. We'd need an injunction. Can you get one? Maybe, if we file an emergency motion showing irreparable harm and likelihood of success on the merits. But judges don't like stopping legitimate business transactions. We'd need to prove the entire board was either complicit or misled. Catherine stood, moving to the window. The sun was setting over fields that had probably grown the same crops for generations. Unchanging, stable. Everything her life wasn't. The board wasn't complicit. They were lied to. Garrett showed them forged emails, manufactured evidence. If I can prove that, if I can show them the real evidence, some of them will flip. Enough to block the vote. You can't get to the board, James pointed out. Garrett controls access. Not all of it. Catherine turned back to the room. Thomas Chen. He voted against my removal. His daughter went to school with me. We're not close, but we're not enemies. If I could reach him... Daniel was already shaking his head. The second you contact any board member, Garrett finds out, Chen's phone is probably monitored. Then we don't use phones. Catherine's mind was racing now, fitting pieces together. Thomas Chen lives in Greenwich, same neighborhood I grew up in. He takes the train to the city every morning, 7:15 from Greenwich Station. I know because my father used to take the same train. You want to ambush a board member at a train station? I want to have a conversation in a public place where Garrett's people can't interfere without causing a scene. Catherine looked at Daniel. If I give Thomas the evidence, if he sees what Garrett's really doing, he can call an emergency board meeting, force a vote before the Vanguard deal closes. Daniel considered. It's risky, but it's less risky than meeting Garrett directly. I still don't like it, James said. You show yourself in Connecticut, you're on Garrett's turf. Then come with me, you and Daniel both. And leave Maya here alone? Louise spoke up. Maya won't be alone. She'll be with me. And before you object, James Michael Thornton, remember that I raised you by myself on this farm while your father drank himself into an early grave. I can protect one 7-year-old for a day. James looked at his mother, then at his daughter, then at Catherine. The calculation was written on his face, risk versus reward, safety versus justice, finally. If we do this, we do it smart. We take 2 cars in case we need to split up. We have an exit strategy before we go in, and the second it feels wrong, we abort. Agreed? Catherine nodded. Agreed. Daniel closed his laptop. Then we've got a lot of work to do. I need to draft the emergency injunction. Catherine needs to prepare her evidence presentation. And we all need to figure out how to get Thomas Chen to listen long enough to hear the truth. How long will you need? James asked. Give me 3 days. I want to shore up the legal foundation before we make any moves. Daniel looked at Catherine. Use that time to rest, eat, get your head clear. Because once we start this, there's no stopping. Garrett will know you're coming for him, and he'll hit back hard. Catherine thought of the man in the alley, the voice on the phone, the father who'd chosen reputation over his own daughter. Let him hit back. I'm done running. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm Catherine had never experienced. Mornings, she woke to the sound of roosters and Maya's laughter. Breakfast with Louise, who taught her that scrambled eggs tasted better with butter than oil, that bread needed to be kneaded hard enough to hurt your hands, that gardens grew best when you talked to them like friends. Afternoons she worked with Daniel, going through every document, every email, building a presentation that could convince Thomas Chen in the 3 minutes they'd have before his train arrived. Evenings she sat on the porch with James while Maya chased fireflies in the yard, and they talked about everything except the fight ahead. He told her about Angela, about the year they'd spent traveling before Maya was born. about the way his wife had made him believe that being good mattered more than being successful. Catherine told him about her mother, who'd died when Catherine was 12. About the way Harold had shut down after the funeral, turned his grief into work, his love into expectation. About the loneliness of being raised by a man who saw his daughter as a successor instead of a person. On the third night, after Maya had gone to bed, James asked the question Catherine had been waiting for. "When this is over, what happens to us?" Catherine looked at him across the porch, this man who'd upended his entire life to help someone he'd met in a rainstorm. "I don't know. Do you want there to be an us?" "Yes." The word came out simpler than she'd expected. No calculation, no hedging, just truth. "But I don't know how to be the person who deserves that." James moved closer, taking her hand. "You don't need people. You deserve them. There's a difference." Catherine felt something inside her chest shift, crack, begin to thaw. "Say that again." His eyes held hers in the darkness. "You deserve to be loved, not for what you built, not for your last name or your bank account, just for being the woman who's brave enough to fight when it would be easier to hide." She kissed him then, not because the moment was perfect, but because it was real. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle and certain. And for the first time in 2 decades, Catherine let herself be vulnerable with someone who wasn't going to use it against her. When they finally pulled apart, James rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens in Greenwich, we face it together. Not because I'm trying to save you, because you're worth standing beside." Catherine's voice came out rough. "I'm falling in love with you." "Good. I fell 3 days ago. I was waiting for you to catch up." They sat in the quiet, hands linked, while somewhere in the house Maya slept the dreamless sleep of children who believed heroes always won. The morning they left for Connecticut, Maya gave Catherine a drawing. In it, 3 figures stood in front of a farmhouse. A tall man, a tall woman, a small girl with braids. Above them, a 4th figure watched from a cloud, smiling. "That's Mommy," Maya explained, pointing to the cloud figure. "She's happy you're here." Catherine's throat closed. "How do you know?" "Because Daddy smiles now. He didn't smile like that before you came." Catherine folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "Thank you, sweetheart." Louise walked them to the car, pressing a paper bag into James's hands. "Sandwiches for the road. And James, whatever happens, you bring everyone home safe. You hear me?" James hugged his mother. "I hear you." They drove south in a rented sedan, Daniel following in his own car. The plan was simple. Arrive in Greenwich by 6:45. Position themselves at the train station. Intercept Thomas Chen during his walk from the parking lot to the platform. Show him the evidence. Convince him to call an emergency board meeting. Simple. But Catherine had learned that simple plans rarely survived contact with reality. They reached Greenwich at 6:30. The station was already busy with commuters, men and women in business clothes clutching coffee cups and briefcases. James parked where they could see the main entrance. Daniel took up position on the opposite side. At 6:52, Thomas Chen's silver Mercedes pulled into the lot. Catherine's pulse spiked. "That's him." Thomas was 71, silver-haired, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body no longer obeyed as quickly as his mind demanded. He locked his car and started toward the platform. Catherine opened her door. James caught her arm. "Remember the plan. 3 minutes maximum. If he won't listen, we leave." She nodded and stepped out. Thomas was halfway to the platform when she called his name. He turned, confused, then his expression shifted to shock. "Catherine? My God, what are you doing here? Garrett said you were missing, possibly hurt." Catherine held up both hands, non-threatening. "I know what Garrett said. He's lying. I need 3 minutes of your time. That's all. Just 3 minutes to show you what's really happening." Thomas glanced around, clearly uncomfortable. "This isn't appropriate. You should be talking to your father or the board." not ambushing me at a train station. The board voted to remove me based on forged emails. Garrett created them to cover up the fact that he's been embezzling for 2 years. Catherine pulled out her phone, called up the first file. Look at this. March 15th, Garrett sends an email to Dominic Kane discussing terms for selling Walker Meridian. The timestamp shows it was sent while I was in Singapore. I have passport stamps proving I was out of the country. Thomas took the phone, squinting at the screen. His face changed as he read. This can't be right. Garrett said, Garrett lied. Keep reading. She showed him the wire transfers, the shell companies, the contract signed by Garrett and Kane. With each new piece of evidence, Thomas's expression shifted from doubt to horror. Dear God, Harold knows about this? My father chose to believe Garrett over me. Thomas handed back the phone, his hands shaking slightly. If this is true, if even half of this is true, we need to stop the Vanguard vote immediately. Can you call an emergency board meeting? I can try, but I'd need 4 other board members to agree. Margaret and David will support me, but that's only 3 votes. We need 5 to force a meeting. Then get 5. Show them what I just showed you. Make them understand that Garrett isn't protecting the company. He's looting it. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll make the calls today. But Catherine, you need to be careful. Garrett has people looking for you. I don't know what he's told them, but they're taking it seriously. I know. That's why I'm asking you to move fast. The longer I'm exposed, the more danger I'm in. Where are you staying in case I need to reach you? Catherine hesitated. Telling Thomas meant creating another vulnerability. But she needed an ally, and Thomas had just looked at her evidence without dismissing it. I'll contact you. Tomorrow, same time, same place. You can tell me then if you've got the votes. Thomas's train pulled into the station. I have to go. But Catherine, I'm sorry I didn't fight harder when they voted to remove you. I should have demanded to see evidence. I should have... You're fighting now. That's what matters. He nodded and hurried toward the platform. Catherine walked back to the car, forcing herself to move casually despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. James started the engine as soon as she was inside. How'd it go? He believed me. He's calling an emergency board meeting. Good. Now let's get out of here before... A black SUV pulled into the lot, moving too fast, tires squealing slightly as it parked 3 spaces from Thomas Chen's Mercedes. 4 men got out, all wearing dark suits, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals. Harmon and Associates. Catherine's blood went cold. They're here. James was already backing out of the space. Daniel, we've got company. 4 operators moving toward the platform. Daniel's voice crackled through the phone. I see them. You 2 get clear. I'll keep eyes on. James pulled into traffic, heading away from the station. Catherine twisted in her seat, watching through the rear window. One of the Harmon men was on his phone, speaking rapidly. Another had approached a commuter showing something. A photo, probably Catherine's photo. They're canvassing, Catherine said, showing my picture. Did Thomas see them? I don't know. He was already on the platform. James turned onto the highway, accelerating smoothly. We need to assume they saw you, which means they know you're in the area and they'll be looking. Catherine pulled out her phone. No calls from Thomas, no messages. They drove in silence for 20 minutes before Daniel called back. The Harmon team split up. 2 stayed at the station, 2 got back in the SUV and left. I followed the SUV but lost them in traffic. He paused. Catherine, they had equipment, long-range cameras, possibly listening devices. If they were there when you talked to Thomas, they might have recorded everything. Catherine's stomach dropped. Which means Garrett knows I approached a board member. Which means he knows you're building a case, James added grimly. The question is, does he accelerate the Vanguard vote, or does he come after you directly? As if in answer, Catherine's new phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at James. He nodded. She answered, putting it on speaker. Hello? Garrett's voice filled the car, smooth and reasonable. Catherine, thank God. Are you all right? Everyone's been so worried. Catherine forced her voice to stay level. I'm fine, Garrett. You don't sound fine. You sound scared. Where are you? Let me send someone to pick you up. We can talk about all of this, work it out together. There's nothing to work out, Catherine. The warmth in his voice acquired an edge. I know you think I've betrayed you. I understand why you're upset, but you're not seeing the whole picture. There are things happening at Walker Meridian, things your father and I are trying to protect you from. If you just come home, let me explain. I know about Vanguard, Garrett. I know about the embezzlement. I know everything. Silence. Then in a completely different tone. Who have you talked to? Everyone who'll listen. That was a mistake. The pretense of concern evaporated. You can't win this, Catherine. I've already won. The board voted you out. Your father's on my side. You have no allies, no platform, no credibility. All you've got is a laptop full of files you can't authenticate and accusations no one will believe. Catherine's hands clenched. We'll see. No, you won't. Garrett's voice dropped to something almost intimate. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn yourself into the police, admit you've been under stress, apologize for the disruption you've caused. In exchange, I'll make sure the criminal investigation into your embezzlement goes away quietly. You get to keep your freedom. I get to keep the company. Everyone wins. Except the truth. Except the truth is what I say it is. That's how power works, Catherine. I'm surprised your father never taught you that. He paused. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, things get much less pleasant for everyone involved, including that maintenance worker you've been traveling with, James Thornton, 38, widower, one daughter, Maya, age 7. Heart defect, requires regular monitoring. Catherine's vision tunneled. You leave them alone. Then stop making this difficult. 24 hours, Catherine. Make the right choice. The call ended. James's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He threatened Maya. I heard. Catherine's voice came from somewhere far away. I'm sorry. I should never have involved you in this. I should have. Stop. James's voice cut through her spiral. Garrett made a mistake. He showed his hand. That phone call, that was him panicking. He knows you've gotten to Thomas Chen, knows you're building a case, knows he's running out of time. So he's trying to scare you into surrendering. He's succeeding. No, he's given us ammunition. James glanced at Daniel through the rearview mirror. He'd caught up and was following close behind. Daniel, you get that? Every word. Connecticut's a 2-party consent state for recording, so we can't use it in court. But it's evidence of intent. And the threat against Maya, that's witness intimidation. We can use that. Catherine's phone buzzed. Text from Thomas Chen. Got 4 votes for emergency meeting. Need 1 more. Working on it. Be safe. 4 votes, 1 short of the 5 needed. Catherine stared at the message, then looked at James. I have to go back to New York. Absolutely not. Thomas needs 1 more vote. The only board member I have any relationship with is David Foster. He's based in Manhattan. I can reach him. The second you set foot in New York, Garrett's people will find you. Then we don't give them time. Catherine was already planning. In and out. 2 hours maximum. We meet David, show him the evidence, get his vote, get out. Daniel's voice came through the phone. It's a bad idea, but it might be our only idea. James drove in silence for a full minute. Then, if we do this, it's on my terms. We go in with a full exit strategy, multiple routes, backup plans, and the second I say we leave, we leave. No arguments. Catherine nodded. Agreed. And Maya stays in Wisconsin no matter what. Agreed. James exhaled slowly. Okay, then let's go burn Garrett Blake's world down. They turned the car toward New York, toward the city that had been Catherine's kingdom and her prison, toward the confrontation that would either restore her life or end it. Behind them, the sun set over Connecticut, painting the sky in shades of red that looked like warning or promise depending on how you chose to see it. Catherine chose promise, because sometimes when you've lost everything, the only choice left is to believe that truth matters more than power, and that the people standing beside you are worth more than everything you lost. They reached Manhattan at 11 p.m., the city blazing with light that never dimmed, never forgave, never forgot. James parked 6 blocks from David Foster's brownstone in the West Village, choosing a spot with multiple exit routes and clear sightlines. Daniel circled the block twice before pulling in behind them. Catherine checked her phone. The message she'd sent David 3 hours ago still showed as unread. Either he was ignoring her or Garrett had already gotten to him. "We don't have a backup plan if Foster won't see you," Daniel pointed out. "Then we make him see me." Catherine opened the car door. "David Foster's wife died 2 years ago. Breast cancer. He lives alone now, works from home most days. If his lights are on, he's awake." James fell into step beside her as they approached the brownstone. The first-floor windows glowed warm yellow. Someone was home. Catherine climbed the steps and rang the bell. Silence. Then footsteps, cautious. The door opened on a chain. David Foster peered through the gap, silver-haired and stooped, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan that had seen better years. His eyes widened. "Catherine? My God, what are you? Garrett said you were having a breakdown, that you disappeared." "I'm not having a breakdown, I'm being framed. I have 10 minutes of evidence that will prove Garrett Blake has been stealing from Walker Meridian for 2 years. Will you look at it?" David's gaze shifted to James, then to Daniel standing on the sidewalk. "Who are they?" "People helping me stay alive long enough to expose the truth." Catherine held up her phone. 10 minutes, David, that's all I'm asking. If you think I'm crazy after that, I'll leave and you'll never hear from me again." David hesitated, then closed the door. Catherine heard the chain slide free. The door reopened fully. 10 minutes. But if I think you're wasting my time, I'm calling the police." They followed him into a living room that smelled like old books and loneliness. Photographs of David and his late wife covered every surface. Vacations, anniversaries, the slow accumulation of a life built together. Catherine pulled up the files on her laptop while James positioned himself where he could see both the front door and the window. Daniel stayed outside, keeping watch. "Start talking," David said. Catherine walked him through it. The emails, the wire transfers, the shell companies registered in Garrett's name. The contract with Vanguard that promised Garrett $12 million and left Walker Meridian's shareholders with nothing. David's face changed as he read, color draining away, hands beginning to shake. "Harold knew about this. My father chose to protect Garrett instead of the company, instead of me." David removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, Catherine saw something she hadn't expected. Fury. "I voted against your removal because it smelled wrong. Garrett's evidence was too convenient, too tidy, but I convinced myself it must be legitimate because Harold backed it, because Harold Walker wouldn't destroy his own daughter's career unless he had no choice." His voice cracked. "I was a fool." "You weren't a fool. You trusted someone who'd earned trust over decades. That's not foolish, it's human." "It's still wrong." David stood, pacing. "Thomas called me this afternoon, said he needed my vote for an emergency board meeting. I told him I'd think about it. I should have said yes immediately." Catherine's heart kicked. "Will you vote yes now?" "Yes, absolutely yes." "But Catherine, even with my vote, that's only 5 of 12. We can call the meeting, but we can't stop the Vanguard sale. We'd need 7 votes to block it. Then we find 2 more board members and convince them. In how much time? The Vanguard vote is in 15 days. Then we have 15 days. David shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. Garrett's not going to wait for the scheduled vote now that he knows you're building opposition. He'll call a special session, move the timeline up, force it through before you can rally enough support." James spoke from his position by the window. Can he do that? Call a vote early? With Harold's backing, yes. They'd need to give 48 hours notice, but that's all. David turned to Catherine. You need more than board votes. You need something that forces Garrett into the open, something he can't deny or spin or bury in legal proceedings. Like what? Like a public accusation he has to answer to, press conference, shareholder meeting, something where he's on record and under scrutiny. David moved to his desk, pulled out a leather-bound calendar. Walker Meridian has its quarterly shareholder meeting in 3 days. Tuesday, 2 p.m. at the Grand Hyatt. It's public. Any shareholder can attend and ask questions during the open forum. Catherine saw where he was going. If I show up, present the evidence in front of 200 shareholders and the financial press, Garrett can't have you arrested without admitting there's a case to answer, and the shareholders would demand an independent investigation before allowing any sale to proceed. David's expression turned grim. But the second you walk into that hotel, you're exposed. Garrett will have security everywhere. Getting in will be dangerous. Getting out might be impossible. James crossed the room. How many entrances does the Grand Hyatt have? 4. Main lobby, 42nd Street entrance, underground parking, service entrance on Lexington. Security protocols? Metal detectors at the main entrance during shareholder meetings. Badge check for anyone entering the conference level. David looked at Catherine. You wouldn't get past the lobby. What if she wasn't alone? James was already thinking tactically. What if we created a distraction at the main entrance while Catherine went in through parking or service? You'd need credentials for parking, a legitimate reason to be using the service entrance. Catherine's mind raced through possibilities. What about catering? Shareholder meetings always have lunch service. If we posed as catering staff, too risky. The hotel vets all vendors. David paused, thinking. But there's another option. I'm on the board. I can bring a guest. If Catherine came in as my +1, security wouldn't question it. James shook his head. That puts you directly in the line of fire. The second Garrett sees you with Catherine, your vote doesn't matter because you're compromised. I'm 71 years old and my wife is dead. The only thing I have left that matters is my integrity. If protecting Catherine compromises that in Garrett's eyes, so be it. Catherine felt something crack in her chest. David, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He met her gaze. My Sarah spent 2 years fighting cancer. Every day she fought, and every day I watched doctors and insurance companies and pharmaceutical reps treat her like a transaction instead of a person. I swore when she died that I'd never be the kind of man who values profit over people. He gestured to the laptop. Garrett Blake is stealing from the company my wife and I built our retirement on. He's lying to shareholders who trusted us. He's destroying lives to pad his own bank account. If you're going to stop him, I'm going to help. End of discussion. James studied the older man for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, then we plan this like a military extraction. We go in together, we present the evidence, and we get out fast. No heroics, no improvisation. Daniel's voice came through James's phone. We've got a problem. Black SUV just pulled up across the street. 2 men inside watching the house. Catherine moved to the window, staying back from the glass. The vehicle was unmistakable. Harmon and Associates, same model as the ones in Greenwich. They followed us. Her voice came out flat. James was already moving toward the back of the house. Is there another exit? David led them through the kitchen to a door that opened onto a small garden. Gate at the back leads to the alley. Comes out on West 11th. Daniel, bring your car to West 11th, south end of the block. We're exiting through the back. They moved quickly but quietly through the garden. The gate hinges creaked as James eased it open. Catherine slipped through first, then David, then James pulling up the rear. The alley was narrow, lined with trash bins and fire escapes. Catherine could hear the city humming around them. Traffic. Voices, the distant wail of a siren. New York at night, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in its shadows. They were halfway to West 11th when a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster. Male, mid-30s, wearing the same dark suit as the men in the SUV. His hand moved inside his jacket. James put himself between the man and Catherine without thinking. "We don't want trouble." The man's hand stopped moving but didn't withdraw. "Ms. Walker needs to come with me. Mr. Blake is very concerned about her well-being." "I'm fine. Tell Garrett I'll see him Tuesday at the shareholder meeting." "That's not going to work for Mr. Blake. He needs to see you tonight." "I'm not going anywhere with you." The man's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, I've been authorized to bring you in by whatever means necessary. We can do this easy or hard, but you're coming with me." James shifted his weight, balanced on the balls of his feet. Catherine recognized the stance, a fighter preparing to move. She said no. "That means you walk away." "Sir, I don't want to hurt you, but if you interfere—" "Then hurt me! But you're not touching her." The man's hand came out of his jacket. No gun, too many witnesses, too much risk, but something else. A taser. He never got to use it. James moved fast, closing the distance before the man could raise the weapon. One hand caught the man's wrist, controlling the taser. The other drove into the man's solar plexus, precise and devastating. The man folded, gasping, and James swept his legs out from under him. The taser clattered against concrete. James kicked it away, then pulled Catherine toward the street. "Move now!" They ran. Behind them, Catherine heard the man calling for backup, his voice strained but functional. Daniel's car screeched around the corner just as they reached West 11th. Doors flew open. David climbed into the front, Catherine and James into the back. Daniel accelerated before the doors were fully closed. "Where to?" "Anywhere but here." James looked back through the rear window. Two men were running from the alley, phones to their ears. "They'll have our vehicle description in 30 seconds. "Then we ditch the car." Daniel turned hard onto 7th Avenue, weaving through late-night traffic. "I know a place in Queens, garage owned by a client. We can switch vehicles, regroup." They drove in silence, broken only by the rush of passing traffic and Catherine's hammering pulse. The violence in the alley had lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it had crossed a line. Garrett wasn't just trying to find her anymore. He was trying to take her by force. The garage in Queens was exactly what Daniel had promised. An auto body shop that looked closed but had lights on in the back office. The owner, a man Daniel introduced simply as Vic, asked no questions and offered 3 different vehicles they could borrow. They chose a nondescript Honda Civic with plates that wouldn't trace back to anyone in the car. Catherine's phone buzzed. Text from Thomas Chen. "Emergency board meeting approved Wednesday 9 a.m. We have 5 votes confirmed. Where are you?" Wednesday, the day after the shareholder meeting. Catherine showed James the message. "If we survive Tuesday, we've got a board meeting Wednesday to actually stop the sale." If being the operative word. James looked at Daniel. "What are the chances Garrett lets Catherine walk out of that hotel on Tuesday?" "Slim to none. He knows she's got evidence. He knows she's got board support. The shareholder meeting is his last chance to control the narrative before everything falls apart. He'll be desperate." David spoke up from the front seat. "Then we make sure Catherine's not the only one with evidence. I'll bring copies of everything to the meeting. If something happens to Catherine, I can present it." "Won't work," Daniel said. "You're a board member. Garrett will claim you're biased, that Catherine manipulated you. The shareholders will think it's a power play, not a legitimate accusation." Catherine leaned forward. "What about the press? If we leak the evidence to reporters before the meeting, they'd be in the room asking questions Garrett can't dodge." "Too slow. It's Sunday night. By the time reporters vet the information and get approval to run with it, the meeting will be over." They sat in frustrated silence while Vic moved cars around in the garage, the clang of metal on metal echoing off concrete walls. Then James said quietly, "What about your father?" Catherine's blood went cold. "What about him?" He's the founder, the face of the company. If Harold Walker stood up at that shareholder meeting and admitted Garrett had been lying, admitted he'd made a mistake backing him, that would be impossible to ignore. My father chose Garrett over me. He's not going to change his mind now. Maybe not for you, but for the company, for his legacy. James turned to face her. You said he built Walker Meridian from nothing. Spent 40 years creating it. Would he really let Garrett destroy all that just to avoid admitting he was wrong? Catherine wanted to say yes, wanted to believe Harold was too far gone, too committed to his choice to ever walk it back. But a small voice in her head whispered, remember the study in Greenwich, the bourbon, the sadness in his eyes when he said, I'm choosing the one who doesn't fight me at every turn. Her father hadn't wanted to choose Garrett. He'd just been too tired to fight. Even if Harold would listen, I can't get to him. Garrett controls access. The house in Greenwich is probably being watched. Daniel cleared his throat. Not the house, but Harold still goes to the office, right? Walker Meridian headquarters? Every day. He keeps an office on the executive floor even though he's supposedly retired. What time does he usually arrive? Catherine thought back to 1,000 mornings watching her father leave for work. 7 a.m. He likes to be there before anyone else. Tomorrow's Monday. If we get to him before Garrett knows you're in the building, I'd have maybe 20 minutes, half an hour at most. Long enough to show him the evidence, long enough to make him understand what Garrett's really doing. James shook his head. You walk into Walker Meridian headquarters, you're walking into Garrett's territory. Every camera, every security guard, every employee, they all report to him now. Not all of them. Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts until she found the name she needed. Marcus Ford, head of building security. He's been with the company since before I was born. Loyal to my father, not to Garrett. She dialed. The call rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. Marcus Ford. Marcus, it's Catherine Walker. Silence. Then, Ms. Walker, are you all right? Mr. Blake said, whatever Garrett said is a lie. I need to see my father tomorrow morning before Garrett knows I'm in the building. Can you help me? More silence. Catherine could practically hear Marcus thinking, weighing loyalties. Finally, service entrance, 6:45 a.m. I'll have it open. You'll have access to the executive elevator. Go straight to your father's office. But Ms. Walker, if Mr. Blake finds out I helped you, he won't. I'll be in and out in 30 minutes. Good luck. The call ended. Catherine looked around the car at the faces of the 3 men who'd risked everything to help her. Last chance to walk away. After tomorrow, there's no going back. David spoke first. I'm in. Daniel nodded. I'll stay close in case you need legal cover. James took her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Catherine squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the certainty in his touch. Okay, then let's finish this. They spent the night in a motel near LaGuardia, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. Catherine lay awake while James slept beside her, watching the play of headlights across the ceiling and trying to plan for every contingency. At 5 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went to the bathroom to prepare. The face in the mirror looked like someone she barely recognized. Older, harder, marked by exhaustion and determination in equal measure. She washed, dressed in the one professional outfit Daniel had thought to buy her, charcoal pantsuit, white blouse, low heels, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed CEO, just a daughter going to see her father. James drove them into Manhattan through pre-dawn streets still slick from overnight rain. The city was just waking up. Delivery trucks making their rounds, early commuters heading to jobs that started before sunrise. Walker Meridian headquarters occupied 30 floors of a building in Midtown. Catherine had spent half her life in that tower, climbing from intern to CEO floor by floor. She knew every elevator, every stairwell, every exit. James parked 3 blocks away. Daniel pulled in behind them. Comms check. James said, tapping the wireless earbud Catherine had fitted earlier. She could hear him clearly. Check. You've got 30 minutes from the time you enter the building. At 31 minutes, I'm coming in after you. You won't need to. I hope you're right. Catherine checked her watch. 6:43. She opened the car door. James caught her hand. Catherine, whatever happens in there, remember, you're not asking your father's permission. You're not asking him to save you. You're giving him one last chance to do the right thing. If he says no, we move forward anyway. She nodded, then leaned across the console and kissed him. I love you. I know. Now go make your father remember he loves you too. The service entrance was exactly where Marcus said it would be, propped open with a wedge, security camera pointed away. Catherine slipped inside and found the executive elevator waiting, doors open. She rode up in silence, watching the floor numbers climb. 32, 33, 34. The doors opened onto the executive floor. Catherine stepped out into a hallway she'd walked 1,000 times. Past offices that used to hold people she'd trusted, toward the corner suite that had belonged to her father for as long as she could remember. The door was open. Light spilled out. Harold Walker sat at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, papers spread before him. He looked up as Catherine appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Harold set down his pen. You look like your mother. Catherine's throat closed. She hadn't expected that, hadn't expected the way his voice cracked saying it. You always told me I looked like you. You do, but right now, standing there like you're ready to fight the world, that's all, Elizabeth. Harold gestured to the chair across from his desk. Are you going to come in or just stand there? Catherine entered, but she didn't sit. I need you to look at something. Catherine, whatever you think, Garrett, look first, argue after. She set her laptop on his desk, pulled up the files, stepped back. Harold stared at the screen. His hands shook slightly as he clicked through emails, wire transfers, contracts. Color drained from his face, his breathing went shallow. When he finally looked up, he'd aged a decade. When did you find this? 3 months ago, I tried to tell you, you chose Garrett. Because I thought... Harold's voice broke. I thought you were trying to sabotage him because you resented him. Because I'd chosen him to be CFO over your objections. I resented him because I knew he was stealing. I just couldn't prove it until I found these. Harold stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. Dawn was breaking, painting the buildings in shades of gold and rose. I built this company from nothing. 43 years. Everything I am is in these walls. I know. And I'm watching it die because I was too arrogant to believe my own daughter. Catherine moved to stand beside him. It doesn't have to die. But you have to help me stop Garrett. The shareholder meeting tomorrow, you have to stand up and tell them the truth. They'll never forgive me. The board, the shareholders, the press. I'll be the man who almost destroyed Walker Meridian through negligence and pride. Yes, you will be. Catherine's voice was steady. But you'll also be the man who stopped it from happening. The man who chose truth over reputation when it mattered most. Harold turned to look at her. Tears tracked down his weathered face. Why are you giving me this chance? After everything I've done? Because you're my father. And because Maya Thornton, the 7-year-old daughter of the man who saved my life, taught me that sometimes people need permission to be brave. Catherine took his hand. I'm giving you permission, Dad. You're allowed to admit you were wrong. You're allowed to fix this. Harold pulled her into a hug, the first real embrace they'd shared in 20 years. He smelled like the cologne he'd worn since Catherine was a child, and for a moment she was 12 again, standing at her mother's funeral while her father held himself together through sheer force of will. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I'm so goddamn sorry. I know, so am I. They stood there while the city woke up around them, father and daughter, finally on the same side. The office door flew open. Garrett Blake stood in the doorway, flanked by two Harmon and Associates operatives. His face was controlled, but Catherine could see the fury underneath. "Harold, step away from her. Catherine's not well. She's been spreading lies about the company, making wild accusations. I called building security the moment I was alerted she was here." Harold released Catherine but stayed beside her. "The only lies being spread are yours, Garrett. I've seen the evidence. All of it." Garrett's expression flickered. "You're upset. I understand. But you need to trust me. Catherine's manipulating you, using your love for her to... I've seen the wire transfers, Garrett. The shell companies, the contract with Vanguard." Harold's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I know what you've done. And it ends now. You're making a mistake. No, I made a mistake 3 months ago when I chose you over my daughter. I'm correcting it." Harold moved to his desk, picked up his phone. "I'm calling the board. Emergency meeting today before the shareholder meeting tomorrow." Garrett's mask cracked. "You can't do that." "I can and I am." One of the Harmon operatives moved forward. Garrett held up a hand, stopping him. "Harold, please, think about what you're doing. The press will crucify us. The stock will tank. Everything we've built. Everything I built, you just tried to steal it." Garrett's eyes went dead. "I'm not letting you destroy this company to save her." He nodded to the operatives. They moved toward Catherine. James's voice crackled in Catherine's ear. "We're coming. 30 seconds. But 30 seconds was too long. The first operative reached for Catherine's arm. Harold stepped between them, 64 years old and no match for a trained professional. The operative shoved him aside. Harold stumbled, crashed into the desk, went down hard. Catherine screamed, dropped to her knees beside her father, blood on his temple where he'd hit the desk corner. Eyes closed. The operative grabbed her shoulder. Then James Thornton came through the door like a force of nature. Daniel Torres right behind him. James hit the first operative with everything he had. All the rage of a man who'd lost his wife and nearly lost his daughter and wasn't going to lose one more person he cared about. The operative went down. The second operative pulled a taser. Daniel tackled him before he could deploy it. Garrett backed toward the door. "This is assault. I'll have you all arrested." Marcus Ford appeared in the hallway, blocking Garrett's exit. "I don't think so, Mr. Blake. I've already called the real police. They'll want to ask you about those wire transfers." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Catherine cradled her father's head. "Dad, Dad, stay with me." Harold's eyes fluttered open. "Did we win?" "We won. Just stay awake, okay? Help is coming." "Good." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "I'm proud of you, Catherine. Should have said it years ago." The words she'd waited her whole life to hear. "I'm proud of you too, Dad." Paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. They stabilized Harold, loaded him onto a stretcher. Catherine rode in the ambulance, holding his hand, while James followed in the Honda. The police arrested Garrett in Harold's office, reading him rights while he protested his innocence to anyone who'd listen. The Harmon operatives were cuffed separately, charged with assault. By noon, the story had broken. Media outlets across the country picked it up. CEO daughter exposes CFO fraud. Father hospitalized, defending her. The Walker Meridian stock trading was halted pending investigation. Thomas Chen called the emergency board meeting for that evening. All 12 members attended. Catherine presented her evidence in a conference room that felt too small and too quiet. No Garrett to interrupt, no father to support or contradict her. Just the truth, laid bare in spreadsheets and emails and wire transfers that spoke for themselves. The vote was unanimous. Garrett Blake was terminated effective immediately, all pending transactions suspended, an independent forensic audit commissioned. Catherine was reinstated as CEO. She declined. "I'm stepping down permanently. Walker Meridian needs leadership that isn't connected to this scandal. I recommend Thomas Chen for interim CEO while you search for my replacement." Thomas tried to object, but Catherine cut him off. I'm done, Thomas. I've been running from or fighting for this company since I was 20 years old. I want to build something new, something that's mine on my own terms. She left the boardroom at 8 p.m. and found James waiting in the lobby. How'd it go? It's over. Garrett's out. I'm out. The company survives. James searched her face. Are you okay with that? I'm better than okay. I'm free. They walked out of Walker Meridian headquarters into a city that didn't care about corporate drama or family betrayals. Catherine had spent her entire adult life in that building, climbing toward a future her father had designed. Now she was walking away from it with a man who'd taught her that strength wasn't about control. It was about choosing vulnerability with someone who'd earned it. Her phone rang. The hospital. She answered, bracing herself. Harold had woken up. Minor concussion, a few stitches, but he'd be fine. He was asking for her. 3 months later, Catherine stood in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, looking at the space that would become Maya's Hope Foundation headquarters. The nonprofit had taken shape faster than she'd imagined. Funding from her Walker Meridian severance, legal structure courtesy of Daniel Torres. Office space donated by a landlord David Foster had connected her with. And a mission statement written by Louise Thornton. Everyone deserves a second chance at the life they choose. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What do you think? I think it's perfect. Maya ran across the empty space, her footsteps echoing. Can we paint the walls? Miss Catherine, can we make one wall purple? Purple's my favorite. We can make 2 walls purple if you want. Maya squealed with delight. They'd moved to Brooklyn a month ago, into an apartment big enough for 3. Louise had visited twice, approving of the neighborhood and the school they'd chosen for Maya. Harold had visited once, walking with a cane, quieter than Catherine had ever seen him. He'd resigned from Walker Meridian's board, sold his remaining shares, donated half the proceeds to Maya's Hope and spent the other half setting up college funds for employees' children. He was trying. Catherine was learning to let him. Garrett Blake had taken a plea deal. 7 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. Dominic Kane got 15. The Vanguard acquisition was dissolved. Walker Meridian survived under Thomas Chen's leadership, smaller but steadier. Catherine's phone buzzed. Text from Diane Mitchell, now Maya's Hope's first employee. First client meeting tomorrow. Woman leaving abusive husband, needs safe housing and job placement. Ready? Catherine typed back. Ready. She turned in James's arms, looking up at him. Do you ever regret it? Helping me that night in the rain? Every single day. Her heart stopped. James grinned. I regret that I didn't ask for your name before I carried you home. Would have saved a lot of drama. Catherine hit his shoulder, laughing. You're terrible. You love me anyway. I really do. Maya ran back over, holding a piece of chalk she'd found somewhere. Miss Catherine, can I draw on the floor just until we get furniture? Draw whatever you want, sweetheart. Maya dropped to her knees and started sketching. Catherine watched her work, the careful concentration, the tip of her tongue poking out between her teeth. After a few minutes, Maya sat back. Finished! She'd drawn 3 stick figures holding hands. 1 tall man, 1 tall woman, 1 small girl. Above them, in careful letters, our family. James crouched beside his daughter. That's beautiful, Maya, but you forgot someone. He took the chalk and added a 4th figure on a cloud, watching over the others. Maya studied it, then nodded solemnly. Mommy would like Miss Catherine. She would. She'd like her a lot. They stood together in the empty warehouse that would soon be full of women rebuilding their lives, and Catherine understood something she'd spent 41 years trying to learn. Home wasn't a building. It wasn't a company or a title or a corner office. Home was standing in an empty room with people who chose you not because of what you could give them, but because of who you were when everything else was stripped away. Home was a man who'd run into danger to save a stranger. Home was a 7-year-old who'd given up her favorite scarf because someone looked cold. Home was the choice to be vulnerable and the courage to believe you deserved love. Catherine had lost an empire. She'd gained a family. The trade was worth it. 1 year later, on a rainy Saturday night in October, Catherine stood under an awning in Red Hook waiting for James and Maya to bring the car around. They'd just come from dinner at Louise's. The farm in Wisconsin had become their refuge, the place they went when the city got too loud. The rain fell steady and cold, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light. A woman emerged from an alley across the street, stumbling, favoring one leg. Her clothes were soaked, her hair hung in strings. She looked around desperately, searching for help that Catherine recognized wouldn't come. Catherine stepped out into the rain. "Hey, are you all right?" The woman turned, eyes wide with fear. "Please, someone's following me. My ankle, I can't run anymore." Catherine heard James's voice in her memory. "My wife used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when nobody would blame them for walking away." She held out her hand. "Come with me. You're safe now." The woman took her hand. Behind them, James pulled up in the car. Maya opened the back door without being asked. The woman looked at Catherine, at James, at Maya. "I don't understand. You don't know me." Catherine helped her into the car, remembering a rainy night when a stranger had said the same words to her. "We don't need to know you. We just need to help. That's how it works." They drove through the rain-soaked streets of Brooklyn toward Maya's Hope Foundation, toward safety, toward the beginning of another woman's journey from broken to whole. And Catherine understood, finally and completely, that being saved was just the first step. The real strength came in learning to save others, in choosing every day to be the person who stopped when someone needed help, in building a life that wasn't about what you'd lost, but about what you chose to create from the pieces that remained. The rain kept falling. The city kept moving. And somewhere in the Brooklyn night, Catherine Walker, no longer CEO, no longer defined by her father's expectations, smiled, because for the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was and exactly where she belonged. Home.